Hello, everyone. I'm Donna Fiducia.
And I'm Don Neuen. And this is Cowboy Logic Radio.
Cowboys didn't dance, didn't wear designer shirts. When their hearts were filled with memories, their bodies filled with thirst. They would sit around the campfire and exchange a piercing glares. Back when the West was really wild, cowboys didn't dance.
The President of the United States of America, Donald J. Trump, is named a co-conspirator of a federal crime.
Is that grounds for impeachment?
Do you think impeachment is more likely at this point?
Impeachment.
Does this move the needle at all?
More confidence to move forward on impeachment.
The president facing impeachment.
Impeachment will be on the Democrats' agenda.
The I word, impeachment.
The I word, impeachment.
The I word, impeachment.
The I word.
The I word and impeachment.
Let's take a look at the process of impeachment. Impeachment, 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 to impeach or impeachment, impeachment, he would have been impeached. All of it bringing impeachment back to the forefront.
Talking about impeachment.
Impeachment talk.
Impeachment is a more viable option.
Do you think it would be appropriate to immediately begin impeachment proceedings?
Impeachment.
Impeachable.
Impeachment.
Impeachment. Impeachment.
Impeachment.
Impeachment.
Impeachment.
And welcome to Cowboy Logic Radio, everyone. Impeachment. The I word, impeachment.
Wasn't that just absolutely pathetic?
It's almost like they get their talking points and they can't even make different lingo.
Now, did they do that when you were in the media? When you were
Not that I
at
knew
Fox
of.
or any of the NBC, any of these other networks that you were with? Did they provide you with talking points?
Well, you get the Associated Press, prints out stuff. Of course, back then it was much more, based on fact. And you would look at them and you look at the newspapers, the Post, the Times, Daily News, whatever.
Yeah, but this is scripted. This sounds scripted.
It's exact lingo. That's what's so bad about it. They don't think. They're just seals, just blurting out the same thing over and over again. By the way, that was Tom Hanks in the Money Pit laughing at the very end.
That is the most hilarious laugh.
I have to go back and see that movie. I don't remember it.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Cowboy Logic Radio. Boy, have we got a big old show for you. My name is Don Neuen, ladies and gentlemen, and I am here with my beautiful co-host, the Donna Fiducia. Hello, Donna.
Hello, Don. How are you?
I am doing well. I am just, all this talk about impeachment.
The problem is journalists, period.
The problem is journalists have no idea what they're talking about, and
they're not journalists.
They have an agenda.
They're talking mouthpieces, for the left.
The night of the election, or actually the next early morning in 2016, about 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, you and I were still watching, and Charles Ortel had been long asleep because at 9:30 that night he said, I'm going to bed. Trump's going to win this. You guys can relax. You couldn't shove a greased BB in my bunghole with a sledgehammer that night. I was so stressed out. But Charles Ortel was correct, and Donald Trump did win. But, the one thing you and I talked about, I don't know if you're going to remember this. We said, they are immediately going to start impeachment proceedings against this
Which
president.
They did not impeachment,
and the
but
other
they
thing that we
believe
said, Donna, the other thing that we said is they are going to absolutely strangle this president in the court systems.
Yeah.
That's exactly what happened.
Because Barack Obama was able to stack the courts with leftists that don't know what the Constitution is, or better yet, don't care what the Constitution is, unfortunately. But the thing is, their heads are exploding like Ben Rhodes outside the Javits Center. His brother, by the way, runs CBS. So that's got to tell you one thing there. But it's really scary. And his brother, David, by the way, also used to work with me at Fox before he went to CBS. He was a senior producer at Fox.
I need to make a couple of points before you get into headlines. Ladies and gentlemen, the Department of Justice on 2 separate occasions has issued a rule that you cannot indict a sitting president.
Yes, Mark Levin has told us that, and he's who was that?
That's Siri.
Oh, what's Siri telling you?
Hey, sitting president.
Hi there, Don.
Why does Siri say hi there, Don, when I say, hey, sitting president? Oh, she's not going to do it now. Well, ladies and gentlemen, my phone is muted.
But Siri speaks anyhow.
Hey, Siri, can you indict a sitting president?
Here's what I found on the web for can you indict a sitting president?
No kidding.
Yeah.
What does it say? According to Mark Levin, no.
Hey, Siri, how tall is Donald Trump?
Donald Trump is 6 feet 3 inches tall.
How old is Melania Trump?
Melania Trump is 48.
Robbing the cradle there.
How much does Donald Trump weigh?
The answer I found is 239 pounds.
I got to be honest. Siri is quicker than Denise Simon.
Siri's better than Google, although she probably gets her information from the same place, which I want to get to in a minute.
Well, wait a minute.
About
Hold on.
Google
I got
and all that
interrupted
other
by
junk.
Siri, Donna. Hold on.
Mm-hmm.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Department of Justice itself
The Department of Injustice, you're right the first time.
has laid down the law saying that you cannot indict a sitting president. So that's not going to happen.
Yeah.
Now, the next thing is, what are the impeachable offenses?
There are none because they have to occur while the guy is president or girl, if that ever happens, woman. And that didn't happen. It did happen with Bill Clinton because Bill Clinton did it after he was in office. In fact, he did it in the Oval Office.
Now,
as a
here's
matter of
something else
fact.
that you and I were talking about over the weekend.
What?
Michael Cohen pleads guilty, cops a plea,
Yep.
and pleads guilty to 2 counts of election fraud.
Right.
Okay, violating election campaign regulations.
Yeah. And then he hires
There
Lanny
was no
Davis.
there was no breaking of the law.
No.
All right, so how
used
is
his
it?
own money. He
How
didn't
is
break
it
the law.
that he ends up pleading guilty to non-crimes?
Because he's now... See, the thing is, this is in the Southern District of New York. From what I gather, you cannot pardon someone.
Well,
if that's the case.
And
Now,
that's the plan. See, the President of the United
they're
States can
squeezing
pardon.
him.
He can pardon
Manafort.
someone of federal crimes.
Right.
He does not have the power to pardon somebody with state crimes.
The bottom line is Hillary Clinton and the Clinton crime family, period. Lanny Davis went to law school with Hillary. Lanny Davis is so tight with Hillary.
He's the Clinton's lawyer. That's all
Exactly.
that's basically all he's ever done.
So now
has
he's
been
Michael,
the Clinton lawyer.
Right. So now he's Michael Cohen's lawyer. He's backing away, by the way, from his confident statement he made that Cohen has information to share that says Trump knew about Russian efforts to undermine Hillary in 2016. No retraction, though, from hashtag fake news after they blabbed that all over the airwaves when it first came out. The focus is a 45-minute Trump Tower meeting with Don Jr. 45 minutes.
Now,
so what?
they can indict a
Don
family
Jr.
member
exactly.
of
That
Donald
is
Trump.
the whole
And that's
idea.
who they're going after.
You know what? And if they're smart, they're going to go, the right will go after Chelsea Clinton because that is the real problem right there. So the hashtag double standard here. Let's look at Joe Biden's son and John Kerry's son. While they were their dads were vice president and secretary of state respectively. They had $1 billion deal with the Ukraine, with China. They rode to do these deals to China on Air Force Two. That is the vice president's jet. Where is Mueller on this? Nothing to see here, move along.
Who
These aren't the droids
flies
you're looking
on
for.
Air Force 2.
Peter
Help them out in
Schweitzer.
case they don't know where that's from.
I don't know. What is that from? Oh,
Austin Powers. Come on,
Who
Fiducia.
does number 2 work for?
Who flies on Air Force 2?
So Peter Schweitzer, who does just yeoman's work on this, he wrote Clinton Cash. He has a new book out about all of this, and it's just unbelievable. So this is a huge hashtag double standard. I sound like Sean Hannity again, but it's true. The facts are so prevalent on the other side that it's mind-boggling. A first-year law student could find, in fact, a first-year anybody with common sense could find this as being illegal. Hillary gets $145 million. Bill Clinton gets $500,000 for speeches. And she gives 20% of our uranium to the Russians. And nothing to see here. That's okay, you know. And
here's
what
the
did
bottom
Comey
line,
do?
Donna.
He wrote the exoneration letter before he even talked to her.
Donna.
What?
The Democrats, the left wing, the mainstream media,
Deep state,
can get away with absolutely anything. Absolutely anything. Including these schmucks Antifa, who should be labeled, and hopefully Trump's going to do something about it soon, a domestic terror organization.
Absolutely. And where did they all start? You can look to the left on that. You can look at Obama.
They're all
you can
left.
Look at Hillary. And really, the thing is, Charles Krauthammer, may he rest in peace, wrote about this about 6-8 months before he died. And Charlie Kirk, and when he was attacked having breakfast with Candace Owens.
She's a racist. Don't forget that.
She's racist. She's black, but she's racist. And she's a white supremacist. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Oy. Anyhow, but they're having breakfast at 8:30 in the morning, and they see people tweeting, and all of a sudden, there's a huge amount of people that show up.
It's a flash mob.
Yeah, which is bullcrap. These people are paid.
Flash mob.
No, these people are paid. Krauthammer wrote about this about 6-8 months before he died. These people are organized. I mean, at 8:30 in the morning, most normal people have a job. This is their job. 8:30 on a Monday morning, they're out there bothering Candace Owens and Charlie Kirk. So this is what's really scary to me, because these people just have no idea what life is really like, what capitalism really is, and they wear their Che Guevara T-shirts. I mean,
and their
just
Mao
mental
T-shirts.
Midgets. Yeah, mental.
They stand around with their Mao.
Yeah.
You know, the
Who
thing
killed
is,
6
if you
million
go,
people, Mao. Okay,
why do you support Mao?
they can't tell you.
Of course they can't.
Then
There's
the
no
mental
reason
midget,
to.
Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. She was upset.
Zipline.
She was upset that a coffee shop she used to work at has closed down. Problem is, it closed because of her policies. They were forced to pay workers $15 an hour. Oops. So a successful business apparently can't be successful if the government gets their hands in it. Then you have, you know what's so funny?
Hey, the bottom line is, look what we've been living through the eight years that Barack Obama was in office.
Absolutely.
And then finally he leaves, and the economy and the free market is unleashed.
Yep.
And now we've got what were we reading about this weekend? Potentially 4.6.
Could be 4.6. But since Trump's
And on a
election-
Richter scale, that'll shake the
really.
chandelier, won't it, there, Donna?
Yep, in the White House. Since Trump's election, the markets have added $8 trillion in value. In fact, we hit another all-time high.
Say $8
again.
trillion like Austin Powers.
$8 trillion. Trump says the Fed chairman shouldn't raise rates because the economy is humming, so why slow it down? Those are my words, actually. Fed Chairman Powell, though, is saying he's going to raise the rates anyhow. So this mental giant,
You know, just as we're having a lot of fun, doing well, now that we're doing well, what do? The Fed chair comes in and he raises the rate.
Yeah.
Do we have a guy in there, or is it still that man
Jerome
woman?
Powell.
Remember that? Who was that man woman that was in there? She looked like some kind of a troll
Here's the point.
with gray hair. What was her? Yellen. No.
Yeah, Janet Yellen.
Is she related to Jessica Yellen?
No. So workers, You're making me lose my train of thought.
That's what I'm supposed to do, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Cowboy Logic Radio, first segment, where Don Neuen distracts Donna Fiducia to the point where she cannot do her job. She was successful in the mainstream media, including 9 or 10 years at Fox News, and never anybody rattled her cage. Not one time.
No,
Not
true.
one time.
That's true.
What do I do on Cowboy Logic Radio every damn week? I bother you. I pester you to the point where you can't get your job done.
This is true. But
Yes!
you did buy me the New York Post.
Well,
We
it's like we just get after it.
Thank you, Mr. Cuomo. The thing is that you got me the New York Post, and I'm actually getting all my notes together just like I used to. I rip and read. I rip.
I see. You got to look at her desk, ladies and gentlemen.
So the next thing is I have this other piece of paper from the New York Post, and what is it? It says, out in left field, Elizabeth Warren's batty plan to nationalize everything. This is what Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez also was saying, that businesses workers deserve more. So 115 people are out of a job. This was a huge coffee shop. So ain't socialism grand? Because Elizabeth Warren is saying the same thing. Keep it up, leftists. That blue wave ain't going to happen. Keep it up.
I need to talk about two things.
One thing. Elizabeth Warren says, let me finish this. Shh.
That's a different article. You're not finishing anything.
It's the same idea. Zip it.
Okay.
As long as we're on the Austin Powers.
All right. Back to you, Donna.
Elizabeth Warren of Massachusetts has one-up socialist Bernie Sanders and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. She proposes to nationalize every major business in the United States.
That will go over well.
If successful, it would constitute the largest seizure of private property in human history. Hey, it's not funny. Let's look at South Africa.
I knew you were going there.
Going
on. All right, before you get to South Africa, ladies and gentlemen, this past weekend, as most of you all know, we lost John McCain. Mm-hmm. And Donna and I refrain from posting anything in social media about what would be a family tragedy. I've lost my mom. Donna has lost both her mom and her dad. And for the family of John McCain, our deepest sympathies, and we can relate to what you're going through. And it is very painful, and we're sorry. We really are for the loss. Mm-hmm. With regard to John McCain and his military service, I would extend a hat tip and my respect and my gratitude for John McCain in the military and the things that he went through that are absolutely horrific. Unspeakable.
Yeah, you just can't imagine.
None of us will ever know, and those of us, myself included, that would ever be potentially put in that position, I can't be certain that I would be as strong. I disagreed with John McCain on many, many, many things that he did as a politician. I disagreed with a great deal that he did as a politician. But the bottom line is the McCain family has lost their patriarch, and our deepest condolences go out, and I hope that you will be able to work through this and get back to remembering all of your good memories that you have of your husband, your father, and your grandfather.
He will be lying in state, actually, in the Capitol.
As he should.
Not done a lot for senators because, I mean, he really does have such a distinguished career. Which just proves that we can disagree with somebody, but at the same time, we don't have the hatred that's on the left. No, he actually did say he doesn't want Donald Trump to come to his funeral, and Trump so far is honoring that. I don't know if that could change. Melania is going to go, Bush is going to go, and Barack Obama.
You know, quite frankly, if that was the wishes of McCain, Trump should honor those wishes. You know? The other thing that I want to touch on, and then this will take about a minute, Donna. Mm-hmm. Ladies and gentlemen, every week on the SITREP, the Drive Time SITREP, as well as Cowboy Logic Radio, I discuss this, and I'll continue to discuss this until November. This is without a doubt the most serious and important midterm election in my entire lifetime, if not in the history of the United States. If the Republicans do not get out in large numbers and save the House of Representatives and save the Senate, then the next 2 years will be nothing but the attempted impeachment of Donald Trump. There have been a great number of things that all of us are very proud of that Donald Trump has done. And if you want to see him unleash the wrath against everything that's been going on for the past 18, 19 months, then he must not have the House flip.
Absolutely.
There's only one way to protect the House, and Donald Trump only has one body of the population that is standing in his corner, and that is you and Donna and me, the electorate. We must. He doesn't have the media. He doesn't have anybody in the House. He doesn't have anybody in the Senate that's backing him. He doesn't have anybody in the agencies right now backing him. The only people that back Donald Trump and that can stand beside him are the American people. And if we fail, the next 2 years are going to be absolutely miserable.
The bottom line is the deep state feels 63 million people that voted for Donald Trump are deplorable. Hillary Clinton didn't make a gaffe when she said that. That is what inside the Beltway folks feel. The reason why the media has such contempt for the American voter and for middle America is, you think about it, these people are in the same cesspool. It's not even a swamp. It's a cesspool, because a swamp is a viable ecosystem. This is a cesspool, in my opinion. But they live and they breathe together. Look at Strzok and Page. Look at everybody else. This is the whole thing. They wouldn't have stories if they weren't literally in bed and figuratively in bed with each other through decades.
Actually,
and it's coming to
many
a head
of them
right now.
Actually are sleeping in the same bed.
Absolutely. Many of them are married, and many of them are obviously screwing around like Strzok and Page. But the bottom line is, and I think Vladimir Lenin said it the best, accuse the others of what you yourself are doing. And that is exactly what the Clintons are doing. Make no mistake about it. The DNC, the Clintons, and the Obamas are running this anti-Trump rhetoric that's going on because they themselves did the same damn thing, and they are trying to pin it on Trump. This is a soft coup. This is happening right now in front of our very eyes, and if this keeps up, we are really going to have a serious problem down the road. You think South Africa looks bad? Wait till it happens here.
Well, this is something that you and I also discussed the first Cowboy Logic radio show that we had after the election, and that is be ready for a silent coup. Be ready for a soft coup.
I saw it in 2000 when I was at Fox. The left cannot stand to lose an election. They think it's always something going on. That's why they had the hanging chads and the whole 9 yards. They could not accept an election. And that is when you have a major problem. When elections are not, there's not a peaceful transfer of power. That used to be said when I was growing up all the time. This is so great about this country, a peaceful transfer of power. Make no mistake, the left doesn't want that now. They want to get hold of the
They didn't get what they wanted.
Right. Okay, coming up next, we have Dan Perkins. He's an author extraordinaire. We'll be talking to him. And then Lieutenant Colonel Buzz Patterson, who carried the nuclear football for the Clintons. It's all coming up next on Cowboy Logic Radio.
Check us out on the web at cowboylogic.us.
Welcome back to Cowboy Logic Radio. I'm Donna Fiducia, along with Don Neuen. And our very special guest this half hour is a gentleman by the name of Dan Perkins. Dan is an author, and he's got some really deep thinking books, in my opinion. The Brotherhood of the Red Nile trilogy, which focuses on South Africa as it relates in many ways to the United States. He also wrote a children's book about dementia, Why Can't Grammy Remember Me? But he's also been banned from Facebook. So because he's getting a lot of views about this stuff, and Facebook just doesn't like him bringing out the truth about South Africa, among other things. And so there's so much to talk about. Dan Perkins, welcome back to Cowboy Logic Radio.
Thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure to be with you.
Dan, it is an honor to have you coming to us from your cell in Facebook jail, and we do appreciate you taking the time out of your 23 hours that you have of being in isolation in your cell. We appreciate you joining us.
Right.
You and Paul Manafort.
Right. Yes.
So let's
All right, well, let's go there first. Let's go to jail, and let's find out what happened. What happened, and why have you been, and how long you've been in?
Well, it was over your book, essentially, your book's the Brotherhood of the Red Nile trilogy, correct?
Right. I hope it wasn't about the dementia book.
No.
But who knows with them, or Peter the Little Irish Seal. No, it's about, and I think if I had a person tell me that, and I can't believe it's what they're telling me is true, but to get back to your question real quick, I was banned by Facebook on April the 15th of this year. I was told that my merchandising, my advertising and promotion and my books were not in line with their policy. I pointed out to them that their policy is that you must submit all of your material for approval by Facebook before it can even be run, and they give you an access code that activates your marketing campaign. So I did all of that, but I think what happened was that too many people got interested in what I was doing. I had the first books, which is the Brotherhood of the Red Nile trilogy, and I was doing a special offer, which came out on April 1st, Easter Sunday morning, where I put all three on in audio on a flash memory stick and was off of special pricing. And on April the 15th, when I got my suspension notice from, or barred notice, I guess is the better way to say it, because suspension means they're going to let you back, but they haven't. I had done something like 390,000 copies, or 390,000 page views on that special offer in 2 weeks' time. And I was on the track of probably, because it was growing rapidly, maybe 1 million page views for the month. And they shut it down. And that particular book is about radical Islamic nuclear terrorism against the United States. Just prior to that, I had brought out the fourth book in the series called Ted Baker in Terrorist Gold, which was a continuation of the story of the trilogy. That book got 693,000 views in 40 days. And it's the story. The continuation of the story is about how the Russians compromised the Democratic candidate for president in the presidential election. And people think it wasn't so much the Islamic piece as the last book in the series, being about the presidential election. Of course, I wrote that before the prepresidential election.
I was just going to say, how prophetic was that? How many months before the actual election was that? I mean, that's unreal.
A year and a half. And interesting, the first book in the trilogy, Brotherhood of the Red Nile, the Terrorist Perspective book, was started, again, date sensitivity, February in 2012, finished by June of 2012. And it's a story about a new terrorist group that's formed in Syria, who has developed a strategic relationship with the Iranian nuclear program to convert two old Soviet Union Suitcase 30 bombs into weapons of mass destruction, bring them into the southern border, and attack America. What was interesting, again, this was written and completed in 2012, before ISIS was formed, and the town that ISIS was formed in, Syria.
That was when ISIS wasn't even the JV team. Wow. I mean, that is the problem. That you hit a nerve. I mean, then you had 120,000 that clicked on your page and got no sales because you said each page only got 3 seconds and they were booted off. So darn well that their algorithms. The only time I've been reprimanded was when I said anything about Islam. And that is a major red flag. So you're talking about Islam. You're talking about Iran. Quite frankly, you're talking about, in my opinion, the Obama administration. Because that isn't the axis. That is the axis of evil. You've got $150 billion we've given to Iran. Where do they think that money's going? The insanity is just mind-boggling to me because it's so obvious, and they just can't face up to it. Facebook included.
Now, I had another person write me a note and tell me an email, and she said, this is her opinion, and I respect everybody's opinion. She says, I don't think it was about your books. I think it's about the commentaries you write, because you write I write for 14 different major blogs across the country. The Hill and the Daily Caller and Newsmax and Laura Ingram's Life Set and Clash Daily. I write for some of the biggest blogs in the country, and I'm basically most of the time a front page blogger, which means they move my columns to the very front of the website. So she was saying to me, she says, I don't think it was the books. I think it was all the commentaries that you write, and they found you, and then they wanted to get rid of you. So.
Well, that's true because
that's
you're
possible.
on their radar screen with those kind of things. In fact, David Horowitz has been flagged. His Front Page Mag, they've pulled that. They've got all kinds of problems with that. They're happening right now. And the thing is, unless you're like Diamond and Silk or, maybe Horowitz, he might be able to fight it. Unless you've got a huge national platform where you can go on Sean Hannity and complain or something like that, they can keep you booted off, and it basically stops you from earning a living.
Yes, ma'am. That's exactly correct. And I've talked to a number of different attorneys about the situation of suit, and they say, we think that what they're doing is wrong, but you had an agreement. And I said, yes, I had an agreement, and they had an agreement that said when they reviewed my material and gave me the access code, they passed on it as being acceptable. So I think you're right, though. I think it's, as other people have said, it's just that you exploded in a very short period of time, and they had to do something about that.
Really?
And in reality, they've shut down the children's book, Why Can't Grammy Remember Me, which I think is a wonderful, helpful, informative book. Its ability to sell has been greatly diminished because it's on the list that they can't market. So it's really it's a shame because the reaction to the book has been so favorable, and people love the help but they also love the story, and that's the thing that more than the terrorist books that really bothers me more than anything else is that I came up with something that was helping families, and my ability to market it has been dramatically reduced.
For those of the listeners that didn't have the opportunity to hear the last interview that we had with you, do me a favor and share a little bit about that book, because that one struck home to Donna and I. We found that to be a very special book, and I agree with you. The fact that too is banned is an injustice. But share with the listeners the concept and the basis for that book that you've written.
The concept is that, according to the New York Times, whether you like them or not, the book review section said that the most relevant book for children for teaching about dementia was written in 1984. That was not the rationale why I wrote this book, but it came after I finished the book and began to look at it. It's a very simple story. The title of the book is Why Can't Grammy Remember Me? And it's a story about two little girls who have a gift from the Lord, the ability to find things that are lost, not only in their parents' home, but in the neighborhood and all over town. People lose something, especially something that's very important. They call the little girls, and they come and they look and they search and they think about it, and many often times they find it. So they say to their dads, we really would like to try and help more people, so we want to start a business. The two little girls live next door to each other. One is called Hudson, the other was Charlotte, so they call themselves H&C Lost and Found, and they convinced the two dads to build a treehouse in the backyard that also is going to be an office for the two little detectives. So they don't have any money to pay for advertising, so they spend a whole weekend with their crayons and pencils and make all these flyers handbills, and their dads take them downtown on Monday after school, and they put them all up, and they go back and they sit in their office, and they're waiting for the people to come in. And first week goes by, nobody. Second, nobody. Third week, nobody. And they're thinking maybe everything that's been lost has already been found. But then there's a knock at the door, and there's a young man standing there, and he has one of their flyers in his hands, and he says to them, "My dad says that the reason why my Grammy can't remember me is she's lost her memory. And your flyer says you find things that are lost. Can you find my Grammy's memory?"
Wow.
And they have no idea what he said. They had never heard of it. So they take his name and phone number, and they go downstairs, and they sit down and talk with the two dads. And they obviously know that the two little girls have no idea what dementia is. So they start a journey together, the four of them, to understand what dementia is, how it affects families. And then they write a prescription book for James of things that he can do to help. They can't find the memory of Grandma, but they can preserve the memory of Grandma. And they talk about all these things, and they call James and they give him the book back. And at the end of the book, in the prologue, there are 12 activities that families can do starting tomorrow to begin to preserve the memory of Grandma and Grandpa and aunts and uncles and cousins, so that we preserve the memory of who they are, where they came from, because they are part of our history. And if we have a better understanding of where we came from, we can have a better understanding of where we're going. So it's a wonderful story. The publisher loved the book. They especially loved the interaction between the fathers and the two little girls, because they said in many, 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 many children's books today, fathers are absent. And you've taken the time to give the fathers an important role in the development of these two little girls. And I said, well, it just seemed to me the right thing to do. So people who have read the book love it. I'm doing a major presentation at the major assisted and institutional and independent living facility here in Fort Myers with over 1,500 residents. They've invited me to come to their television network and then do a presentation in early November to the whole constituency to talk about this book and this particular issue. And I do interviews and I've done some book tours. And, I did a tour in Cincinnati when the book first came out, and they had arranged for me to do a meeting with 150 fourth graders, which fit in that 9 to 10-year-old age. And they were extremely well behaved. And I said to them, by show of hands, how many of you have ever heard the word dementia? And almost every hand went up. And I said, how many of you actually have a grandma or grandpa or an aunt or an uncle that you've been told is suffering from dementia? And much less hands went up. And then I said, here's the final question. When you go to visit your grandma or your grandpa, your aunt and uncle at the nursing home, and you ask that question and they don't respond to it by calling you by name or answering your question, how many of you think it's because you've done something wrong?
Yeah.
Every hand went up. Every hand went up. Mm-hmm. They think because grandma's not calling them by name or answering her question or his question that they've done something wrong that made grandma angry with them. And so we have a problem right now in this country. The Alzheimer's Association says we have between 5 and 7 million people that are diagnosed with dementia in the United States today. And by the year 2050, there will be over 50 million people in the United States with dementia. And it's an incredibly debilitating and very expensive disease to have, because it usually is an extended life, although the gentleman I dedicated the book to, a friend of mine and a client, was diagnosed at early onset at 52 and died at 62. Wow. But still he had 10 years, and the last several years of his life was in institutional care. So it's a very expensive disease. And if you understand that it literally, I don't want to be overly graphic here, but there is a physical deterioration of the brain that loses memory and control. And when Ronald Reagan had it, Nancy Reagan
I was just going to bring that up. What did she say?
The the long, slow goodbye.
Yeah. I hosted the 90th anniversary, birthday anniversary, whatever you want to call it. He was still alive, for Ronald Reagan on Fox. I hosted that show. And obviously, even then, he had no idea. And they were talking about how he had a fishbowl in the house. And inside the fishbowl was a figurine of the White House. And he fished it out of the fishbowl, and he went running over to Nancy, and he goes, Nancy, I know I should recognize this, but I don't know what it is. Can you imagine that? Somebody with a life like that, and he can't even take it, to the end of his life and remember it.
It is that to me is the most debilitating, debilitating part of dementia, is that there are two people affected. The person who has it, who eventually loses his memory, does not know anybody that's around them. But even more difficult and more affected are the people that are left behind.
Yeah.
Yep. The survivors who, the woman who gave birth to me now doesn't even remember who I am. Mm-hmm. And the anguish that we have as family members when we go through that, it's a terrible, terrible disease, and we don't talk a lot about it. I have a gentleman from India who saw the book, read the book, and is working with a publisher in India, because while we have 5 to 7 million people diagnosed, and Alzheimer's believes there are probably more, in India, he says there are over 100 million people with dementia in India.
Wow. Dan, let me reintroduce you, and I want people to know that even though you're in permanent Facebook jail right now, they can find your books at danperkins.guru, correct?
Right, or you can buy them at Amazon.com.
Amazon.com. Okay, and it's the book about, the children's book about dementia is Why Can't Grammy Remember Me? And it talks about Hudson and Charlotte. If you lose it, we can find it. 183,000 views before Facebook shut you down. Just a shame. Shame on Facebook and Zuckerberg. What a jerk. I'm sorry. danperkins.guru and Amazon.com. But Dan Perkins, again, you're also an author of these various books about South Africa as well, and radical Islam. You can read his stuff at Newsmax, LifeZet, The Hill, Clash Daily, Daily Caller, Reagan Babe, Newsmax. Did I miss anything? Yeah, I think that was, there's a few probably. But again, find his books at danperkins.guru, Guru, and Amazon.com. Dan, let's talk about, now switching gears, about the Brotherhood of the Red Nile trilogy. Essentially, you're talking about South Africa, what really is sort of happening here in the United States. But the real big thing with South Africa and the fact that they're killing off white farmers is not necessarily for the land, but for what's underneath it.
Yes, I believe that. And most of the people are talking about, most of the stories that I've read internationally keep talking about, well, the government wants to take the land back as reparation for the land being stolen by previous generations of Afrikaners, and they want to give it back to the African people. Well, we have a couple of problems with that, is that a lot of African people don't know how to farm, run the farms, and if the farmers leave and they haven't instructed the African blacks to how to farm, food's going to disappear. So it really is when you start to wonder what's going on, and you realize that a lot of this farmland is sitting on top of vast stores of coal. South Africa and Africa in general has a problem with power. Blackouts are not uncommon, and power being off a good bit of the day. So you cannot build and sustain an economy if you don't have a reliable source of power. And coal is the most efficient producer per kilowatt hour of any of the alternative fuels. It isn't really about putting the farmers back on the farmland. It's about getting control of the natural resources in the ground. And the history has been that the two most precious resources in Africa, supposedly for the West, has been diamonds and gold and other precious metals. and those have been harvested and shipped out of the country without little economic benefit. And they're trying to do things with that, but now they've discovered all this coal underneath all of these farms, and something like 72% of the farmland in South Africa is controlled by 8% of the population, which are the Afrikaners. And but it's all a matter of really socialism, because the idea here is that you take control of the resources and you give them to the people. Well, they don't want to give the coal to the people. They might want to give them some farmland. They're not really interested in teaching them how to be farmers. They want the coal. And so we have the parallel of Ms. Cortez and other people in the United States who want to turn around and believe that their new brand of socialism will be different than what has been in the past, and yet they want to give everybody free health care, free Medicare, free college, and a free job working for the federal government, among a bunch of other things. They want to take from you all of the corporate profits. They want to take from you all of the dividends and interest you earn on your investments, give them to the central government, and the government will decide. That's socialism. And they believe in their heart of hearts that while Venezuela was a good idea, they just did it wrong, and this time they can do it right. And that's been the cry for generations of
hundreds of years. For hundreds of years.
Yes.
This is unbelievable. It just doesn't work. The Pilgrims found out it didn't work when they tried to have like community farmland, and a couple people didn't work. Eventually they kicked them out until they started to work, because the people who do work are sick of carrying the weight. I mean, even Elizabeth Warren had the nerve to sit there and say, I think last week, that government has to say it's okay for you to start your business. And the problem is, in my opinion, this has been going back 100 years or so with Woodrow Wilson when it started, and quite frankly, the Russians, as they meddled in our education system. And this is exactly the propaganda that we thought was so horrible that Russia was doing, is what's being fed to our kids now for generation after generation.
It's definitely happening with our kids. Fairfax, Virginia public education, elementary schools. Mark Levin was talking about it last week. You know, every year before school starts, you get this list of things, pencils, papers, erasers, things like that you have to go out and buy for your children once they start their new school year. Well, what happens up in Fairfax, Virginia, is that, and this, I believe, is the largest county in Virginia, the most populated county in Virginia, is that, you know, first day of school, everybody comes into the classroom and they put all of their newly purchased supplies into one pile, and then they are redistributed equally among all the students in the class.
God, give me a break.
How about that for socialism in the first grade?
Yeah.
And I know it's. I did a piece for Newsmax. I think it was Newsmax, but it may have been Conservative Republican. I write so many. But the story is the most important thing. I know. The issue is that I believe the fundamental problem that we have in the United States is that we no longer teach American history in our schools. If you look at the standardized testing, about 18% of the students who graduate from high school have a rudimentary understanding of the Constitution and how our country was founded and how it functions. It is no reason then, it's very reasonable to expect that the socialists who are in charge of our schools are teaching, as you just pointed out, social activities. They're not teaching capitalism, and they're not teaching the American way.
They're not teaching
life. And so they're trying to create...
You know, they're really not teaching what real life is about, unfortunately. Our kids are not going to be able to compete on the world stage.
Right.
Guys, we've got members of the House. We've got members of the House and the Senate that don't understand how the Constitution works.
I know. They really ought to have a basic test for these people, and maybe an IQ test would be the first thing they should have, and that would throw a lot of them out, too. Dan, unfortunately, we're pretty much out of time.
How about a background check? Why don't we start there?
Yeah, that would throw out a bunch
sadly, the American people are supposed to be the background check.
They're not. Dan Perkins, author, Brotherhood of the Red Nile Trilogy, looks at terrorism in the U.S. and South Africa and exactly what's going on there. Thank God, actually, more and more people are starting to talk about that if Facebook doesn't choke them down anymore, but that's pretty much the case. Ladies and gentlemen, you can find all of his books, including the children's book about dementia, at danperkins.guru, danperkins.guru, and on Amazon.com. Read his blogs at all the major places, Newsmax, LifeZet, Clash Daily, Daily Caller, The Hill, and Reagan Babe. Again, folks, this really is a fight for our country. And as Dan just said, history's not being taught. And if it's not being taught, unfortunately, we're going to repeat it, and that is not good for the American people. Dan Perkins, thank you so much for joining us here on Cowboy Logic Radio.
Thanks, both of you, for having me on. It's always a pleasure to be with you.
danperkins.guru, folks, and Amazon.com. And coming up after the break, we're going to be talking to Lieutenant Colonel Buzz Patterson, who carried the nuclear football for Bill Clinton. Says he lost it, 2 or 3 times? Always interesting conversation. It's all coming up next on Cowboy Logic Radio.
It's all around me. It's all around me. It's all around me. Yeah.
Check us out on the web at cowboylogic.us.
Hello, everyone. I'm Donna Fiducia.
And I'm Don Neuen, and this is Cowboy Logic Radio.
Cowboys didn't dance, didn't wear designer shirts. When their hearts were filled with memories, their bodies filled with hurt. They would sit around the campfire and exchange a piercing glare, yes. Back when the West was really wild, cowboys didn't dance.
There is just not too much one can say about Lieutenant Colonel Buzz Patterson, because what he's done will leave you speechless, folks, and he's going to tell you more about it in just a minute. Okay, he's been a guest on our show, Cowboy Logic Radio, member of our Talk America Radio kitchen cabinet, and he just happened to carry the nuclear football for Bill Clinton, President Bill Clinton. Lieutenant Colonel Robert Buzz Patterson, United States Air Force retired, is the author of a New York Times bestsellers, a bunch of them, Dereliction of Duty, the eyewitness account of how Bill Clinton compromised America's national security. Reckless Disregard, how liberal Democrats undercut our military, endanger our soldiers, and jeopardize our security, something they're doing right now. And War Crimes, the left's campaign to destroy the military and lose the war on terror. Conduct Unbecoming, how Barack Obama is endangering our national security, just to name a few. Colonel Patterson served 20 years as a pilot on active duty in the U.S. Air Force, saw tours of duty worldwide, including combat ops in Grenada, Somalia, Rwanda, Haiti, and Bosnia. What kind of countries are they? No, don't say it. Don't say it. This is not CNN. Third world countries, there you go. From 96 to 98, Colonel Patterson was the senior military aide to President Bill Clinton. And during that time, he was responsible for the president's emergency satchel, otherwise known as the nuclear football. The black bag that the nation's nuclear capability that accompanies the president of all times. And again, boy, does he have stories to tell. In addition, Colonel Patterson was operational commander for all military units assigned to the White House that included Air Force One, Marine One, Camp David, White House Transportation Agency, and White House Mess. Among his many military commendations, he received the Defense Superior Service Medal for accomplishments while at the White House, and was awarded the Air Force Air Medal for flying 15 combat support missions and then besieged Sarajevo, Bosnia-Herzegovina, back in '94. He retired in 2001 to pursue a career as a commercial airline pilot, a writer, and conservative speaker. His experiences and writings have been featured in such films as Hillary the Movie and Blocking the Path to 9/11. He's a frequent guest on talk shows across the country, including television appearances at ABC News, Diane Sawyer, Hannity, The O'Reilly Factor, CBS Morning Show, Fox and Friends, Hardball with Chris Matthews, The Dennis Miller Show, C-SPAN's Book Notes, Joe Scarborough, Heartland with John Kasich, MSNBC, and you've heard his radio shows everywhere from Rush Limbaugh to Cowboy Logic Radio and everyone in between. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome yet another American hero and patriot, Lieutenant Colonel Buzz Patterson.
Well, thanks so much. It's great to be here. Thank you for the invitation, Donna. through Joe Dugan, invited me out here. I live in Los Angeles. I used to live in just down the road in Charleston, South Carolina, which was God's place on earth, and my first assignment in the Air Force, and still have very fond memories of that being my first time flying airplanes for the Air Force. And I'm a North Carolina boy. I was born in Chapel Hill, so coming across the border was a little bit difficult, but I certainly found a way to love Charleston and a way to love Myrtle Beach. As Donna said, before we get into where we're going right now with Making America Great Again and my involvement with the Trump campaign, I would like to talk about some of my background so you can understand how just a small town southern boy who came in the Air Force to be a pilot can now be talking to you and having some influence and writing books and participating in campaigns. My father was an Air Force pilot. He was in the Air Force for 33 years. He's a Vietnam veteran. He flew AC-130 gunships up and down the Ho Chi Minh Trail back in the day and shot up a lot of bad guys in their trucks. And he ended up retiring as a two-star after 33 years and being the Air Force's Special Operation Command Commander. I came in the Air Force in 1981 initially. If you recall, that was a transition between Jimmy Carter and Ronald Reagan, and I initially had put in my application under Carter to be an attorney for the Air Force, and then when Ronald Reagan was elected, I thought, you know what, I want to be a war fighter. I want to be in the front lines of battle. I don't want to do this backdoor stuff, and so I became a pilot in the Air Force. I had never flown before, but the Air Force taught me well, and I went right to work flying out of Charleston, South Carolina Air Force Base after my wings in 1983, which taught me a lot about, in fact, I don't talk about this a lot, but my very first military combat experience was in October of 1983 when Reagan decided to go into Grenada and to prevent the Soviet Union from expanding their operations and building fighter bases in the Caribbean. And my very first operation in combat was the second airplane on the ground in Point Salinas in Grenada, and we were dropping Delta Force and SEALs, and we made sure that airfield was going to fall very quickly to the United States of America and not become a Russian Soviet Union fighter base for the Soviets and for Cuba. So that was my first taste into combat. I flew throughout the 80s and early 90s as an Air Force pilot and got involved with a lot of special operations. Where my change in attitude and change in I think political frame of reference and conservative ideology became when in the summer of 1995, I was a squadron commander in the northern part of Northern California. I was a C-141 squadron commander, for those of you who remember that beautiful airplane that used to fly around the world and do all kinds of crazy stuff. So I was a squadron commander in Northern California. And as such, for those of you who've been in the military, you know that a flying squadron is much like a fraternity in college. So I was the head guy. I was the squadron commander. The phone rang in my office in 1995, and I answered the phone, and the voice on the phone said, well, this is the White House wanting you to come interview to be the president's military aide. Now, I immediately assumed it was the yahoos down the hall trying to play games with me, so I hung up on the phone call from the White House, thinking that those guys will never get me again. And the phone rang again, and it was, in fact, the White House Chief of Staff's office, Leon Panetta's office, to be precise. And Leon Panetta said, he'd been one of 6 picked out to be interviewed by the White House staff to come out and be President Bill Clinton's senior military aide and carry the nuclear football. Quite frankly, I had no idea what that job entailed. I heard about the nuclear football. I knew there was something that was pretty important that followed the president, but I had no idea about the job, and it's a job they don't let you apply for. So after taking the second phone call and realizing that discretion is the better part of valor, I flew out to Washington, D.C. and interviewed to be through the White House process to potentially become President Bill Clinton's military aide. Now, the process is a very intensive 3-day process. By the time I got there, they had talked to my family members, my best friends in high school, my college roommates. They had all my tax returns. They had my credit card receipts. So they knew more about me than I knew about myself, and they were just looking for me to step on it somehow and embarrass myself. But I didn't do that, fortunately. And so I got to the 3-day process, and ultimately, Leon Panetta was the man I ended up meeting, and he said, this is a very important job, and we don't really care about your politics. We just want to know if you can loyally and honorably do your job. And I said, yeah, I've been flying airplanes and saving people and dropping bombs. I can certainly do this for a living. And they said, well, sure. Well, we'd like to ask you to come out and be President Bill Clinton's military aide. So I accepted on that night, and about 2 weeks later, I was actually in the White House. I had to sell my house in Northern California very, very abruptly, and being single wasn't that hard, and get beat feet out to Northern Virginia. I had a bedroom in the White House and an office in the White House, if you can imagine, as a young major. How overwhelming that must be. But I remember walking into the White House my first day. It was a very crisp spring day, and just thinking, I have reached the pinnacle of what I could possibly have done. I've flown airplanes in combat. I've been very happy. I've done my job diligently, and I've done with complete loyalty and credibility. And now, my very first day in the White House, I'm walking into my office, into my bedroom, and I'm serving the commander-in-chief, the president, who is just now beginning to start the re-election campaign of 1996, if you guys recall those days. So I got there right at the very beginning of the re-election campaign, and we hit the road running like nobody's business. We were flying across the country. We were hitting 4 and 5, 6 cities a day, and I had the football. And to go back a little bit, so that you understand the historical basis for the military aid. Ever since President George Washington, there's been a military aid. There's been a military guy, as kind of a senior ranking person that would be at the president's side, that could answer questions or give him advice, or just be a confidant there if he needed some help in terms of the military. Under John F. Kennedy, when the advent of nuclear weapons happened, and during the Cuban Missile Crisis, they realized that the president had to have a no kidding, hands-on military aid with the nuclear football capability and the nuclear codes to be able to respond. Now, the way the process works, and there's been a lot of stuff talking in the press recently. It's been kind of fun to watch President Trump go back and forth with Little Kim in North Korea, and also back and forth with, thank God, not the future president, Hillary Clinton. So the way the process works is that there's a large black satchel, which is called the football. And the military aide possesses that football. He's the only guy that actually can get into the football. There's a bunch of codes and algorithms and things that have to happen. But the way the process is supposed to work is the president has the nuclear codes, and he needs the military aide to be there to help him transmit those codes or communicate those codes with the Pentagon. It gets down to the Pentagon senior authorities, and that's when people get the signal out in submarines to start turning keys, or in missile silos to start turning keys, or in bombers, B-52s or B-1s or B-2s to start turning keys. So the whole thing kind of flows downhill, but it does take two human beings. The human being, number one, being the president, the most important person. Human being number two, being the military aide that's there to facilitate that. And I was the number two guy, and I'm in the military guy that gets facilitate that. So that's how I got there. And it does require that you have an office and a bedroom in the White House. So for the years 1996 to 1998, I actually lived with the Clintons. So you can imagine the things that I saw on a daily basis, and no 2 days were ever the same. Time for a drink. So my bedroom was in the east wing, lower part of the east wing, and of course the Clintons lived up in the middle part of the residence. But I was supposed to be within 2 minutes response time from them, no matter where they were. So we would go on trips. We would go on Air Force One. I was with them. Marine One. I was with them. We would go overseas, vacations, whatever. I was always in the hotel room or the castle room or whatever complex we were staying in. I had the room right next door to them. So it was 2 years of bright-eyed and bushy-tailed exposure to what these two people were all about. Now, I actually I've written several books, but my first book, Dereliction of Duty, which was a bestseller for about a year on New York Times and still doing pretty well, talks about my day-to-day existence because I walked in like most American service people or civil service workers would walk in. I walked in with grand expectations. I walked in with just enthusiasm. Again, I wasn't neither right or left at the time. I was a military guy, so I was taught to just salute smartly and respond to whoever was my boss, and I did that. So I walked into this office and this experience thinking, okay, I'm walking into the most important building in the world with the most important person in the world, where the real policy goes down and where action takes place, and someplace that place I can be really, really proud of. Well, it didn't take me long, literally a matter of a couple of weeks, till I realized that I had walked into a hornet's nest, and they weren't all that great, and they weren't all that up to speed in terms of organizations that I had worked for privately, or personally, previously. So I'm going to give you a couple of examples, and I don't want to make this all about the Clintons because I want to move on, but I will be certainly willing to talk to you about the Clintons, Hillary, and Chelsea later on in the evening as we disperse from here. So my first experience with the Clintons after getting hired was we went to a professional golf tournament. I used to jog in the morning with the president when he still jogged, and he used to like to go to a lot of golf tournaments. So we were at a professional golf tournament in Lake Manassas, Virginia, and in 1996. And if you recall, during this time, ironically, Saddam Hussein was in charge of Iraq, and he was trying to extinguish the Kurds in the northern part of Iraq. He was trying to ethnically cleanse with chemical weapons and biological weapons the northern part of Iraq. He wanted to just decimate and remove the hundreds of thousands of Kurdish people who lived in the northern part of Iraq. I say all this because it's my job as a military aide. I was also the person who took call screens. So if the phone call came in for President Clinton and we were away from the White House, it could be Hillary or Jesse Jackson or just about anybody. I would receive the phone call, and they would go through me to approach the president and say, "Sir, I have so and so on the line. Would you like to take the phone call?" So on this day, we have the Republican Guard in Iraq that are storming north and attempting to essentially kill hundreds of thousands of Kurdish people in the northern part of Iraq. His citizens, by the way, not ours, but his citizens. So we, the American people, had said, okay, as a response, we'll launch our fighters and bombers, and we'll go up there and we will repel the Republican Guard and push back this attack and save these people. So at this golf tournament, my job was to receive phone calls. I received 3 phone calls from Sandy Berger, who was a National Security Council advisor. Some of you may know him now as Sandy Burglar, because he stole a whole lot of important crap and pushed it down his pants and destroyed it. But at the time, he was a National Security Council advisor. So Sandy's calling me saying, "Buzz, we've got fighters and bombers in cockpits. We are prepared to go. We're prepared to fly under the cover of darkness. We're prepared to repel the Republican Guard and save the Kurdish people." So I was on board. These guys and girls in cockpits were my peers. I understood fully what was going on. So 3 times I approached President Bill Clinton, who wanted to watch the golf tournament, and 3 times I was rebuffed by Clinton saying, "I don't have time to take the phone call. Tell Berger I'll get back to him later." And I did on all 3 occasions. Now, the moral of the story is not so much that President Bill Clinton likes to watch golf. The moral of the story was that when his senior national security policy advisor and his senior military aide walks up to him and says, "Sir, we've got to act now. We've got the cover of darkness. We've got fighters and bombers in position to launch." And the president did not take a single phone call. So he chose to watch golf tournaments over having the lives of 300,000 Kurdish members assassinated in the northern part of Iraq. That is my how do you do welcome to being President Bill Clinton's military aide. On a second occasion, now I am sworn to secrecy as a military guy. I'm not at this point in time writing a book. I'm not even keeping a journal. I'm just trying to do the best I possibly can for this man. My second occasion, and I knew all about Monica Lewinsky. I knew about Paula Jones. They were in and out of the Oval Office. And the way the Oval Office access works is you have lapel pins, and the Secret Service can tell what your access is to the president by the color of your lapel pin. And I remember saying many times to the Secret Service, why is the young intern who's 20 getting the same access to the Oval Office as everybody else is getting? And that was Monica Lewinsky. So I was told just to leave it alone, presidential best friend kind of thing. And I came to know Monica, not as well as Bill came to know her. Which probably saved my career and my life. But I did come to know Monica. I knew what was going on. But I wouldn't even have written about this in my book, but this is another telling thing. My books are written from a standpoint of a senior military officer who is involved in seeing a political situation go down and coming back to the point, okay, what is best for us? What is best for the common taxpayer? What is best for our military men and women who go to war around the globe 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, don't get any kind of recognition, and what should we expect from our commander-in-chief? So this book was written from that perspective. So I don't talk about Monica Lewinsky. I do talk about the fact, though, that correspondingly, when the Monica Lewinsky situation hit the mass news, I mean, I knew about it. I'd seen him around. I knew what was going on. I even walked on him on one occasion, and I kept my mouth shut. But when the Drudge Report released the Monica Lewinsky situation, the story, the Drudge Report broke it back in January of 1998, and then the Washington Post picked up on it, and then everybody else had to pick up on it. I was the first guy, and they say timing is everything. I was the first guy that walked in and had to be on President Bill Clinton's schedule that morning at 7 a.m. Now, I write about this in Dereliction, and I also write about it in a blog I did recently. But my duties with the president was to make sure that he was way up to speed on military issues. He was way up to speed on how nuclear processes would fall out. He was way up to speed on if we ever needed to do the codes, how it worked, how the exercises worked, how the process flowed down from there, and how it had to go out. So one of my jobs was to every 3 or 4 months go in there and say, okay, sir, this is how this needs to happen, and do you have any questions? I would be there just to be his. I was his senior guy. I had to make sure he was cool with how it all went down. So that morning that the Drudge Report broke it, I was the first guy on Clinton's schedule. So I'm walking into the outer Oval Office, which was where Betty Curry sat and her secretary, social secretary sat. And the way the Oval Office is constructed, there's an outer office, and then there's the actual Oval Office that you guys see that's on TV a lot, which is the actual office space. And then there's a room, a hallway that comes back off, which is kind of an informal Oval Office, which is where Clinton would go watch college football or do his thing with Monica, apparently. But anyway, so I'm walking into the Oval Office that morning at about 6:50. I'm the first guy on the schedule. Betty Curry, his secretary, is not there. I know I'm the first person, and I walk by all these newspapers that are lined up on the front, on the top of Betty's desk. And that's what he always wanted. Clinton always wanted the headlines of the day to be out there so he could figure out how to respond to the latest crisis. So the LA Times, New York Times, Washington Post, they were all there, and I remember walking by and knowing about the whole Monica thing having hit the press, and I looked down at the Washington Post title, and it says, "Sex Scandal Rocks White House." Now, I knew it wasn't going to be a really happy time to be working there that day with President Bill Clinton. I used to pick and choose my fights and my battles with that guy. But I knew I had to walk in at this point in time and say, okay, sir, what do you want to do?
Check us out on the web at cowboylogic.us.
So I walk in, and typically the protocol was that I would say, okay, sir, you got any questions about the military? You got any questions about how the nuclear codes work? And can I just in passing, can I see that you in fact have the nuclear codes? Because the nuclear codes are a credit card sized document, which Don alluded to, credit card sized document that actually Bill Clinton kept rubber banded to his other credit cards in his pants pocket. He didn't wear a wallet. He had to have a rubber band, the nuclear codes, and his credit cards. So as I'm walking into his office, I see that he's behind his desk. He's just bloodshot as hell. His white, his skin is white as it goes. He's been up all night. He's not in any kind of mood to talk. I can see that. So I said, sir, I'll just come back later, if you don't mind. I can see you're not in a good place, but I'll just come back later. We can talk about everything else. But if you can just do me a favor and show me the nuclear codes, you've got the nuclear codes in your person. Now, he didn't, which became a huge deal. So I said, he said, I don't have them with me. I don't know. They might be upstairs in the residence. And I said, well, when's the last time you saw him? So we ended up doing a big search of the residence. And I had to come back down and say, we can't find him, sir. When's the last time you saw him? I don't know. And I said, well, what do you mean you don't know? Has it been days? He goes, possibly. I said, has it been weeks? He said, possibly. And I said, has it been months? He said, possibly. So here we are. This is a young major in the Air Force, and I'm thinking, this guy has not only been having an affair with this young intern, but now he has lost the frickin' nuclear codes. So I've got to call the Pentagon back, and it has never happened before. So I'm the bearer of great tidings again. Okay, guys, we've got no nuclear codes. So what are we going to do now? So the military just really jumped to their butts and got some recreated, got them over there the next day. But there was a period of time, which is the moral of this story is, that there was a period of time, and I write about this in Dereliction, that we as a country, we as a commander-in-chief and President Bill Clinton, did not have the ability to either launch or retaliate with nuclear weapons for what may have been several months. And to me, that is dereliction of duty, to say the least, but it's also what was speaking to me, really telling to me, was the fact that his only thing to me after that was, please make sure this does not get to the press. He did not want that rolled in on top of the Monica Lewinsky thing, and so I told him, I said, sir, I will make sure, as long as I'm here, the rest will not get this. But then I was able to retire in 2001 and write about it in Dereliction of Duty, so now you all know just how derelict that guy was as our commander-in-chief and the purveyor of our military, and it could not have been a worst-case scenario having that guy running our troops. Could not have been. So I'm going to move on to one more, if I have time, one more Clinton story, then I'll talk about what I'm doing here for you guys today. As the military aid guy, as the Air Force guy also especially, I was not just in charge of the nuclear football and keeping Bill Clinton out of trouble. I was also responsible for Air Force One, Marine One, all those crews. All the drivers were Army guys. All the cooks and chefs were Navy guys. All the communications people, White House communications people, are a huge organization across the river over in Fort Belvoir that do all of the communications and intel and computer stuff for the White House. So that was my real job, was being the daddy rabbit to all those people for 2 years as we traveled around the world. Now, the final straw in my time with the Clintons, and I've got Hillary Clinton questions. I've got Hillary stuff too, which I don't have time for tonight. But I'll be happy to share. Trust me. What a bitch! What an evil bitch! What a vindictive, evil bitch! But but let me get. I'll come back to. If we got time, I'll come back to that later. So my last straw with Bill Clinton was that because I was in charge of all the Air Force One people on the cruise and in Marine One, you know, back in this was like 1998. So there was a lot of things going on in the military in terms of sexual harassment and sexual misconduct, and so we were flying back from a long trip in Europe. I think most trips were like 10 or 12 days, and then we would land on Air Force One at Andrews Air Force Base, and then we'd helicopter over from Andrews One to the south lawn of the White House on Marine One. So this is a typical trip. So I've got Bill and Hillary on the airplane. I get them on Marine One. We transfer back over to the White House. It's about midnight, so we would land on the south lawn, and I would put the football away, and I would try to get Mr. Clinton, President Clinton, upstairs into his bedroom and put him to bed, and then I could start doing my thing, because my job wasn't complete until he was down, and then I had to be awake again in the morning before he got up. So he didn't sleep. So literally for me, it's like a 4 or 5 hour a night for 2 year kind of deal. So it was stressful. Anyway, so I get the president in his bedroom after this European trip, and I get to my room, and I'm starting to wind down and watch some TV, and the phone rings in my office, and it's the president's pilot, Colonel Mark Donnelly, good friend of mine, Air Force Colonel Mark Donnelly, good friend of mine, who was the president's Air Force One pilot. So whenever we went overseas, Mark Donnelly was the guy flying the airplane, and he and I, being pilots and Air Force guys, got along great. So we came back from this trip. I'm putting myself to bed, and the phone in my bedroom rings in the downstairs in the East Wing, and it's Colonel Mark Donnelly. And I say, "Sir, okay, Mark, what's up?" He goes, "Hey, Buzz, we got a problem." I say, "Okay, what's up, Mark?" You know, now it's like 2 o'clock in the morning. He goes, "Well, I have a young staff sergeant, female flight attendant. All the Air Force One back in people were Air Force enlisted. So all the flight attendants were Air Force staff sergeants, female staff sergeants, and all the security people were Air Force enlisted people doing all the security. All the communications people were Air Force. So the front end of the airplane was officers and pilots, and in the back of the airplane was all communications people and flight attendants and security." So he's calling me and says he has this young female staff sergeant in front of her, and I know her name, and I will not release it tonight. First name is Leah. That's all I'll give you. But that Leah was in his office in tears because President Bill Clinton has sexually attacked her on board Air Force One in one of the galleys and sexually molested her. So I said, my first response, and I know this is on TV, so I can't give you my first response. My second response was, okay, what does she want? Now, you know, what does she want? So he said, she's married, she has young children, she's a staff sergeant, she wants to remain promotable in the Air Force. All she wants to do is have the commander-in-chief apologize to her at some future point on Air Force One. Now, that next morning as a young major, I'd been shot at with bullets from enemies, ranging from the Russians to the Cubans to the Bosnians, and I have never, ever in my life felt as insecure and unprepared as I felt the next morning walking down from my office to the Oval Office as a young Air Force major and confronting the commander-in-chief and telling him that he had to apologize to a young female staff sergeant for sexual molestation aboard Air Force One, America's airplane, the one we're all paying for. Now, that was the toughest thing in my career I've ever had to do. And I did it, and his reaction to me was much less honest than I would have thought it would have been. He was very non-contrite. He said, okay, I'll talk to her. Next time we're on Air Force One, I'm sorry if it upset her feelings, that kind of thing. But he totally grasped her and fondled her on Air Force One. So after that, we arranged an apology on Air Force One 2 weeks later. Then we were both flying again. We did it in, the president's got a office space, kind of an office, and also a conference room on Air Force One. We did it in the office. We got Mr. Clinton, President Clinton, and this young lady, and she accepted his apology, and that was the end of that. However, from my perspective, having been a commander in the Air Force for years and having prosecuted men and women for many sexual transgressions, to include just poor workplace humor or the use of an off word in an office environment, and we had Article 15 them or court-martialed them. Here is the commander-in-chief getting off with blatant physical sexual harassment on board Air Force One, which to me was completely unacceptable and was the final straw into me leaving the Air Force and writing this, because this is the story that needs to be told, that still needs to be told. And I couldn't do this in the military till I retired in 2001 and went to fly as a commercial airline pilot for Delta Airlines. And so I wanted to get this off my chest and a lot of other people's chests that I had worked with. And so I became a bestseller, New York Times bestseller for a long time. Rush Limbaugh carried it for a long time. Amazon still carries it, still selling very well. I've written 3 more books since then. I embedded myself as a journalist in Iraq in 2005. As an Air Force guy, I spent all my time at 35,000 feet and didn't get a lot of chance to see what was happening down on the ground. So I went and lived with our Marines and Army troops in Iraq in summer of 2005, and that will wake you up, and that will get your attention in terms of the enemy that we face going forward in terms of what is radical Islam. And I did that and wrote my 3rd book, and my 4th book is about President Obama and conduct unbecoming. My real talk here tonight is to appeal to you. I got out of the aviation business about a year and a half ago when I was contacted to join the Trump team and be a Trump surrogate in California and start talking about the importance of character and integrity in our U.S. military. Thank you. I alternately had a agenda that I saw that Mrs. Clinton was running, and knowing Mrs. Clinton, I could not stand the possibility, not even remotely, of her being our commander-in-chief. So I retired from Delta Airlines and have thrown myself into being a Make America Great Again person. And a funny story, knowing Hillary and having lived with them for 2 years, when I started leaving aviation and getting back into speaking and writing and stuff, this is how Hillary operates. I got a phone call. I mean, I live in Los Angeles now. So I used to live on the East Coast. I used to live in Charleston. I used to live in Atlanta. I used to live a lot of places. But I moved to California back in 2006, 2007, and the phone in my office rang, and it was Hillary's professional secretary, a person that I had known, 20 years in the past, working at the White House. So I knew we had shared some good times, and I knew that she wasn't calling me because she was concerned about my health and welfare. She was consoling to see what I was going to be up to with Hillary Clinton. So this is an honest-to-God story. So the phone rings in my office, and I haven't talked to Chris Insko in literally 20 years. And she calls and says, hey, Buzz, this is Chris. I'm working for Mrs. Clinton. I said, great, congratulations. He goes, can we count on you coming out in support of Mrs. Clinton? I said, no, I don't think that's possibly going to happen. She goes, well, can we call you and count on you not being in opposition? And I said, no, I don't see that happening either. So they said, well, can you just be quiet? And I said, no, that's not going to happen either. So thank God, our guy won. She didn't win. And I'm not taking personal responsibility, but I helped it along. So let's make America great again. I'd love to sell you guys the books. Come see me. Thank you. I do. If I can do a quick little admin. Oh, can I talk about Hillary too? Oh, good Lord. Let's get this going. Sit down. Good Lord. Hillary Clinton. So if you all want to leave, you can, but you're going to miss some good stuff. So, so Hillary, when I moved in there, I actually moved in with both of them. So I had, like I said, I had a bedroom in the White House and an office in the White House, and no matter where they went, I went. Vacations, Camp David, St. Thomas. I even took Chelsea to her first year in Stanford, first year of school at Stanford. And I will tell you this about the two of them. Bill and I would jog together and have a good time together. And he didn't have a moral fiber in his body, but that was okay with me. We had a good time. But I would tell people, what's he like? I would say, have him over to your house for a barbecue, but keep him away from your wife and your daughter. Just have their demilitarized zone. Just have as much space as you possibly can between that rat and anybody you're close to. Now, Hillary is a whole different figure, a whole different person. She was the person that when in the White House, I had been told by my predecessor, he said, if anybody, you can pretty much get away with anything in this job, but if you piss her off, she will rip your heart out and spit it out. And so I took that seriously, and he was right. So in my 2 years there, I never made her mad. I never crossed her. I saw her routinely just chew people up and eviscerate them, and people that were close to her too, like her. Close aides, close senior aides, close personal aides to her. She would just take them apart, and she would do the same thing to her husband. There was one time when we were, especially after the Bonica thing went down, that was not a happy place to be for my last year of service in that building. There was one time when we were on our way to a fundraiser in Washington, D.C., and it was in a hotel. And the way we did these motorcade movements, we had a typical motorcade is you see the limousine with the president and the first lady, and then there would be a black van behind the motorcade, and that's where I sat. I sat, they call it the control van because it's got all the radios and stuff, and it's where the military aides sat, the doctor sat, the chief of staff of the White House sat, one of the senior agents sat, and it was just all the big hitters other than the first family. So we're coming into this hotel loading dock for this nighttime fundraising thing, top of this hotel, and I can already, I'm right behind the motorcade, so I can already see that their heads they're going at it like nobody's business, So I know this is not going to be one of those events you just kind of roll into. It's going to be kind of a shakedown. And so we get into the way they do these elevator things is that it would be the first lady, the president, myself, a doctor, and one agent. So we get into the elevator, and she is unmittingly just on fire, chewing him out with every four-letter word you've ever heard in your entire life. It's so unhinged and heated in her rhetoric that I'm trying to lean into the outside of the elevator wall just to avoid the collateral damage, and I'm watching the president just kind of nodding his head like, "Yes, dear, yes, dear." He knows he's lost. This is a done deal. So apparently the deal was that she was holding him responsible for Janet Reno not giving her. Janet Reno was forcing her to testify in the or give her a statement in terms of the Whitewater thing, and so Hillary was holding Bill responsible for the Department of Justice lady the Attorney General for not letting her skate on the whole Whitewater thing. So, gotta imagine this. We're going from like floor 1 to like floor 20, and it's a very smooth, very slow operating elevator, and we're all just trying to get out of the way and not hear anything. And I'm looking at the agent, and they're looking at me, and the doctor's going, So it's one of those really uncomfortable things. But as soon as the elevator doors open at the top that walk into the fundraiser, they're all holding hands and shaking, just waving like nothing had happened at all. And that's who the Clintons were. I saw her throw things frequently at people. I never personally was the recipient of one of those, but I saw her throw things at her husband, books, lamps. One time we were coming back from having an event downtown, and she wanted to stop and do a impromptu dinner at some restaurant that the Secret Service guys had not yet swept for security. So the Secret Service guy that was driving was trying to explain to her, yes, ma'am, we can go there, but it might be 15, 20-minute wait until we can actually get inside and screen this thing. Well, that was not good for Hillary, and I don't know what book she was reading, but it was a hardcover, and she whipped that thing at the back of the guy who was driving down the highway at 65 miles an hour. He hit him in the back of the head. His head went forward, and I thought, we're going to crash. And his head popped right back up again, and he maintained, but that was the typical Hillary event, Hillary scenario. Yes, sir. Yes. Yes. The question is about her visceral hatred to the uniform, and yes, sir, you're 100% correct. There was only a few of us in the White House that were military. There was me, there was the doctor and the nurses. They sometimes wore their uniforms, they sometimes did not. The guys that were the Marine Corps guards outside of the West Wing always wore theirs. When I first arrived there, which is the beginning of the re-election campaign of 1996, I was told by her, I don't want any military uniforms in the White House. So I said, well, that presents kind of a conundrum because, I, the military aide, have the nuclear football and all this technology to make this stuff go down. If you're expecting me to look like the Secret Service guys and wear the same dark sunglasses and the same suits with that one satchel, you're not going to be able to find me. So you need to relent on terms of Social Security, national security alone. Your security, if things were to go south and they couldn't find me because I'm part of the Protect D package also, they will not find the football and they will not find you, and this will not go well. So that was my very first staff job in the White House, was convincing Hillary to let us wear our uniforms outside of the White House just for protection purposes. And she allowed that, but for the rest of the time that I was there, we had to be wearing whatever the president was wearing, which was typically a business suit or golf attire. But yeah, that's how she felt about the military. Yes. Every day was a new day with them, and I will tell you that many times as the senior military aide, I feel like the only adult in the room, including them. Okay, so there are many times that their arguments escalated into very verbal, what I would phrase almost domestic violent situations. Yeah, that happened, and I'll be honest with you, that there's a very fragile line you have to walk there. When you've got people who are Secret Service guys who are there to protect the office of the presidency and the principals, and then you've got the office of the presidency and the principals being the ones that are going at each other, that's a very hard line to enforce with those guys. And like I said, I was there through a couple of those, and I was always able to calm things down. But both, and this should be understood, both Hillary and Bill have very incendiary tempers and language. Now, Bill would be one of those guys that could just blow up, but within 5 minutes you could kind of pull him back down to earth, and he'd have his hand around you apologizing. Hillary, once crossed, is always crossed. So it was very dicey for those of us who were long-term staffers to have to understand that if she went off, the thing was just to placate her best she possibly could. One time we were flying to, and I'll wrap it up for Joe here pretty soon. One time we were flying to a vacation. It was a New Year's Eve vacation. We had flown from Hilton Head, South Carolina, down to St. Thomas in the Virgin Islands. They were there for a Renaissance weekend. And so I was with them when we had left on New Year's Eve, and we arrived there on New Year's Day late at night. and we were on Air Force One. We landed at St. Thomas. Now, and when the airplane lands, the Air Force One's, it's a big airplane, but there's only like 68 people on board. So you can just, you have the immediate trust and the pulse of the entire airplane. So I could see that Hillary was already out of her seat, spitting herself into the ceiling about something. So I walked up to approach her, and apparently the deal was that Chelsea had left her school books or textbooks back in the hotel at Hilton Head, and it was everybody's fault but Chelsea's. So Hillary, in no uncertain terms, yelling at me and a whole bunch of other people, said, I want those books flown down here tonight to be in her room by tomorrow morning. So I scrambled an Air Force jet out of Andrews Air Force Base to fly down from Maryland to go to Hilton Head to find those books in the hotel and fly them down to, a great taxpayer expense, by the way, fly them down to Hilton Head so that to St. Thomas, so that they were on the bedside when Chelsea woke up. Now that probably cost us $45,000, but that's how you dealt with Hillary Clinton. And that kind of thing was not the exception, it was the rule. Anyway, I'm going to wrap it up now, guys. I would love to have you guys come talk to me and buy my books. I've got a lot more stories, cards, and I'll be joining also a new talk radio site this week as well, so I'll be talking about this stuff online as well. So please check out my cards. I'm on Facebook, all the normal places, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and please sign up and follow me, because I am back doing this now and I'm going to be kicking ass. So thanks very much.
Check us out on the web at cowboylogic.us.